Hello, welcome to episode 3 of the Willard Preacher podcast. Again, I'm Matt, former Penn State student and Orthodox Christian, who was greatly impacted by Gary's ministry out at Willard in the mid to late 90s. And I'm chatting here with Gary Cattell, known as the Willard Preacher. He's known as the Willard Preacher because he's been preaching the gospel outside of the Willard building for years now, and has had a tremendous impact on the campus there at Penn State. So good evening, Gary. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. And you?
Doing just fine. Thank you. Thanks for being on with me again. And so I think last time we started off with sort of recapping the week at Willard. So let's try that again. Anything new and exciting going on at Willard?
There was a couple of things I was going to talk about. One that happened today, one that actually happened a couple of weeks ago that I thought could be instructive too. The one today, there was somebody, I guess it was another YouTuber, was out in front of Old Main, and I was told he's going to be out there until 5. So I said, I'll come out a little before 5 because people say, oh, you ought to go over and talk to him. He's talking about all this stuff and he wants debate and all this stuff. And went over there, and unfortunately, they had closed down earlier than I had thought. One of the things that I was told that they were going to talk about, I asked the question, why do conservatives hate transgendered people? And, I get that all the time. Mostly for, transgendered homosexuals and abortion, mostly. Used to get it for the homosexuals a lot. Why do you hate homosexuals? Why do you hate homosexuals? I keep trying to tell people, if I really hated homosexuals, if I really hated the transgendered, I really hated women who've had abortions. And I believe that if you're transgendered or you have abortion or you're homosexual or whatever, or you support abortion, whatever it is, but you're heading to hell, would I wave my hands and say, stop? Right? No, I would say if I really hated them, I'd say, okay, well, sit in my easy chair, wave to them, say, everything's going great. God loves you. Keep going. And watch them, walk off into hell and wonder how they got there. You're not going to try and stop people from going to hell if you hate them. Mm-hmm. You're going to encourage them to go to hell. And then, so I also try to ask them, I asked them if they had parents. Most did. I said, well, do your parents love you? Most say yes. I said, well, did they ever tell you did something wrong? And they'd say yes. Did they still love you when they told you that? And they say yes. Well, then why do you think we necessarily hate homosexuals or transgendered or whomever? Because we say they were doing wrong. And we never get this for the fornicators or the drunkards. It's always just for the homosexuals, the transgendered, and to some degree to the abortion. It used to be a lot for the abortion. Why do you hate women? Mm-hmm. It's all ploy. Yeah. It's not about hating them. It's about trying to get people, if people think that if they come out against transgenderism, against homosexuality, against abortion, whatever, that they're going to be called haters, most are going to take a step back and say, I don't want people think that I hate. So I'm not going to do that. And that's what it's all about. Mm-hmm. It's all about trying to smear the other side so they don't talk. And that happens a lot, they try to keep us from talking, from saying you hate people or whatever it is. They only want one side to talk and they don't want the other side to talk. So that's what that's all about. The other one was, I know this guy out at Willard. He's a great guy. He's probably in his 50s. Protestant evangelist, out evangelizing all the time. He comes by every Thursday. We talk, and I wish the Orthodox were half the evangelist that he is, because he's out there all the time. And we got in a talk about 2 weeks ago now, and he said he believed that we couldn't lose our salvation. That once you're a Christian, you can't lose it. And when I asked him about it and we started to talk about it, his view is this, and I'll try to do it justice if I can. What he said was, well, I'm a father, and I have a son. If that son turns his back on me and walks away, I'm still his father and he's still my son. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change. So now what he does, I'm still his father, he's still my son. Nothing changes. So that was his kind of example of, if we walk away from God, we came to God, we were, quote, saved, so we became his son or his daughter. And now if we walk away, that doesn't change. He's still our father. We're still his son or daughter. And I was trying to say to him that that's kind of a legalistic way of seeing things.
Mm-hmm.
As Orthodox, we don't see anything that legal sort of, well, you were not a son of God, and now you are a son of God. It's just a legal transaction. We see it in terms of relationship.
Yeah.
And so because, the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, they've always been in this relationship with each other based in love. And the reason for creating us was to share that love with us and to share that with everything they have with us. And so what they want is relationship with us, and what hopefully we want is relationship with them. But if we break the relationship and walk away, then that's the problem. It's not a legal transaction. There's no more relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've lost the relationship. And if you can come back, it's the whole thing with the prodigal son. You can come back into the relationship, but if you've broken the relationship, then it's broken. You no longer have it.
Right.
And the problem with that idea is, let's say you become a Christian. There's always this kind of infatuation period or whatever when you first become Christian. Everything's wonderful, everything's great. But then you have to be tested. You have to go through tough times. You have to fight with sin, fight against sin. And you can go through some dark times, and you have to get through it. It makes you stronger, makes your relationship with God stronger. It shows you your sin, maybe you get rid of some sin. And if you think, well, I can't lose my salvation, why am I going through all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I just indulge in some sin? Why don't I just do whatever it is I want to do? It doesn't matter because I can't lose my salvation. Well, then you're walking away from God. You actually are losing your salvation, but you don't think that you are. And you could go in that ignorance and just, again, walk off into hell and wonder how you got there. Because you thought, well, I couldn't lose it. But you could lose it because it's not a legal transaction, it's a relationship thing.
Yeah.
So those were the kind of the two things that happened that I thought may be instructive to somebody, I hope.
Yeah, that sounds like some good interaction. As you're describing that sort of second one, I was spending some time kind of discussing with one of our priests here in Austin, sort of a similar thing. What you were describing, where it is very much a legal transaction. I would wonder if in talking with that gentleman, if he felt like how he felt like man was changed by becoming a Christian. You know what I mean? So because depending on sort of what flavor of, let's say, Protestantism or whatever that someone was, they might say that, okay, they come into this, they're saved, and they haven't done anything. God has moved them from this column to this other column, so from non-saved into saved. So depending on sort of where he might stand, either we maybe are changed or maybe you're not, but nevertheless, it is sort of this legal status, right? Like, right, being saved is something that is imputed to someone, as opposed to there actually being an interaction that transforms us. So that's so much more of what we're as Orthodox Christians, what we're trying to enter into. So that's one thought, is, like you said, it is about the relationship. I would also wonder, at what point, how does free will operate in that setting, right? So does free will operate up until the point where you say the sinner's prayer, perhaps, and then you're saved, and now no matter what you do, you can't walk away, or you can't lose that salvation? I don't know. It's puzzling how that is, to me, how that's supposed to fit together.
Yeah, some of the more stringent Calvinists saw predestination. Before the world was created, God decided he was going to save some people and not others. And the way they talk about it is, well, before Adam and Eve sinned, they had free will.
Mm-hmm.
Once they sinned, they fell so hard and so far that now there's nothing they can do to reach out to God at all. So God just has to kind of reach down, pluck them up from the kingdom of darkness, put them in the kingdom of light. And if he doesn't do that, then you end up in hell, because that's where you deserve. You're a sinner. And so they believe that when God picks you up and puts you in the kingdom of light, that shows God's mercy and grace. And if he doesn't, well, you get what you deserve anyhow, because you're a sinner and sinners go to hell. Now, obviously, the problem with that is, if you're one of those sinners going to hell, what choice did you have? What chance did you have? There's nothing you can do to reach out to God. And they say that's God's justice. Well, it's not just, because you didn't have a choice. You have to have some sort of choice. We don't put foxes in jail for raiding a chicken pen. We're going to kill them, but we don't put them on trial or anything, because they didn't have a choice. That's just who they are. Well, you don't have a choice in this matter. It's just who you are. So sometimes I relate it to, let's say you're on a ship at sea. There's 100 people on the ship and 100 life preservers. And something happens and all the people fall off. And the captain takes 50 of those life preservers, throws them in, saves 50 people, lets the other 50 drown, and say, aren't I merciful? No, you're going to jail. Because you just let 50 people drown that you could have saved, that couldn't save themselves. So what sort of God is it? These people cannot save themselves. They can't do anything to reach out to God. And God just says, well, I'm going to show you my justice by sending you to hell. No, it's not justice at all. Now, for this guy, I don't know that he goes that far, because there isn't another camp where they say, okay, you're free up until the point that you reach out to God and he saves you. Then at that point, like I said, you're his son. You can never lose that. I think he's in that camp, although I'm not totally sure. They both have problems. And I think unless you have the whole relationship thing, yes, the scriptures do say God won't let us go. Nothing can, no angel, no devil, nothing can come in to separate us from the love of God. But it never says we can't separate ourselves.
Right.
And the fathers were the same way. When they dealt with fate, nobody's fated. Everybody has free will. And you have to carry that through to the end. If you don't carry through to the end, then you've left God. Then you're on a different road now. You're on the road that leads to hell, and you're willingly walking down that road, and you will willingly keep yourself in hell forever.
Right. Yeah. I had this thought that at some point we might spend some time talking about, like, what are some of the particular distinctive ideas about specifically orthodoxy that would be more appealing than these sorts of ideas. The fact that excuse me, the fact that within all of that, within all of salvation history, within our personal lives, that God so respects our free will, and of course that has everything to do with the fact that he wants us to freely enter into that relationship. That love is a freely chosen thing, so that we can actually be in real relationship of our own accord. That is a loving God, a God that sort of won't, it perhaps it's nice from his perspective that, like, well, I'm still his son and I can't lose that. That's reassuring, but it's not respecting his free will ultimately, which does beg the question of, like, what are the dynamics of this love relationship?
Yeah, you don't tie somebody up in your basement. People say, why do you have that person tied up in your basement? Well, because I love them so much, I don't want to lose them.
Right.
No, they have to be free to come and free to go. But some of the things I think that are more understandable about Orthodoxy, one of them at least, is there's an understanding, and it started in Roman Catholicism, and I don't know if it's still there or not. It's in much of Protestantism, that it's God who sends people to hell. God gets angry. You've sinned against God. He's righteous. He's holy. You've broken the law. You deserve hell. He throws you into hell, and he's going to keep you there forever because that's what's just. And we don't go down that road. What we believe is that people freely walk into hell, and they become eternally unrepentant after a while. And because they're eternally unrepentant, there's nothing God can do to get them out of hell. Because again, he always respects our freedom, because like you said, love respects the freedom of the other. You don't tie the person in the basement. You don't stalk them. They respect the freedom. So if somebody wants to leave, God doesn't like it. He tries everything he can, I believe, outside of tying them up in the basement to get them back. Besides, not infringing on their free will. But if they persist and they end up there, any one of us end up there, we will eventually become eternally unrepentant. And if he goes in there and just sovereignly changes us, then how's he respecting our freedom? How is that love? He has to respect our freedom for him to love us. So a lot of the hard questions that people ask are answered by the fact that God loves us. So why is there an eternal hell? Because God loves us. Because he's not going to infringe on that freedom. Why is there evil in the world? Because God loves us. Because he's not going to infringe on that freedom. We know what we should do. We have the law of God written in our hearts. We have the natural law. We know we shouldn't murder, rape, pillage, and destroy. We know when we do wrong, but we do it anyhow. So why is God at fault for that? He's given us the 10 commandments. He's given us both the Old and the New Testaments. If we walk away from that, if we don't care about that or whatever, and we don't care about the natural law or God's law that's in our hearts, then that's on us. That's not, the blame's not on him. So most of those difficult questions are, people would say, well, where was God in the Holocaust? Why is God to blame for the Holocaust? Ever since Adam and Eve, and we don't believe in, because our scientists tell us not to, but ever since Adam and Eve, we've wanted to blame everybody but ourselves. Adam blamed Eve, he blamed God, Eve blamed the devil, I guess didn't have anybody to blame. But where do we take personal responsibility? God's not responsible for these things, we're responsible for them. He allows us to do them because he loves us. And the idea that God keeps his anger on people in hell forever, and it's unforgiving forever. I mean, he tells us not to go to sleep on our anger, not to carry anger over to the next day, to forgive people no matter how many times they sin against us. And he's going to keep his anger forever, never to forgive. I think one of the understandings in Orthodoxy is that God's love is in hell, and it's tormenting people there because they don't want it, and it just torments them that it's there. And their own sin and unforgiveness also torment them. But yes, most of these things, the wrath of God, like if you look at the wrath of God in the Old Testament, what was it? Well, okay, you want to worship idols, that's fine, you can worship idols, and you don't want me, I'll let things go the way they go, and Babylon's going to come in and destroy you because you went that way, you didn't want my protection anymore. So that's a lot of what the wrath of God is, just allowing us, okay, we don't want him, so whatever comes. So anyhow, I think that's some of what makes, a little bit of what makes Orthodoxy a little bit more appealing than kind of the wrathful God of Protestantism who has to keep you in hell forever for some sort of justice. Or because he won't forgive or something. I think God is always forgiving. The people in hell are eternally unrepentant. So, Jesus said, repent, for the kingdom of God is here. We have to want to turn from our sin and turn back to God. And if we're unwilling to do that, doesn't matter how forgiving God is. It's all on us for our lack of repentance.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sorry. As you're talking through this, there are these different layers of things that we could, maybe another time talk about, as far as, how we understand what Christ did for us. That properly understood, it's a completely loving God doing everything he can to bring us back to him and to bridge the gap and to defeat death and all of that. I think probably a lot of what other folks in other parts of Christianity maybe insist upon in terms of those salvation ideas, things like substitutionary atonement and so on. For someone outside of Christianity, it ends up being a really, it can be something that definitely pushes them away simply because they're seeing a picture of God that is not loving, that is not a God that tortures people in hell for all eternity, or a God that, God the Father can't forgive us. Instead, he's got to lay out his wrath on his son. Um, that's not a loving God. I can be more merciful than that.
Yeah, and it's not right, and it's not justice either, because no matter how much we sin, and we sin much more than we think we do, right? If sin is anything that falls short of the glory of God, not just in our actions, which is how most think about it, but in our thought processes, our intentions, our motivations, our desires, all these things, we sin innumerable times. But when we die, it's not infinite sin. It's a finite amount of sin. So how does an eternal damnation fit with a finite amount of crimes? No, it doesn't fit. It doesn't. It just doesn't work. And you're right. That's what people see. They see this wrathful God who has to take out his anger on his son, or also take it out on us. Kind of very pagan-esque, right? Or this God doesn't know what justice is, doesn't know how to forgive. This is supposed to be this loving, forgiving God of Christianity. And a lot of that's why a lot of people, ultimately turned their back and walked away. Bad in the love of sin, of course, but that's why they turn their back and walk away. And that's the sort of God that the atheists bring to us. And of course, again, we always say, that was the real God, I wouldn't believe in him either, because that's not the real God. It's kind of the Calvinist God, or that wrathful kind of stuff. Again, it started in Roman Catholicism and came over into Protestantism. And it's turned multitudes away.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Well, one thought I had, this is maybe a tangent at this point, but this idea of us maybe going back, that the idea that we can't break the relationship, we can sort of see a similar thing in the way that, for example, Catholics will say, well, we don't believe in divorce. Right? It's a sacrament. God has united these people. We don't believe in divorce, so you can't be divorced. Well, we believe that marriage, as Orthodox Christians, we believe that marriage is a holy mystery, that God unites these people, but nevertheless, if we choose to, we can break that relationship. It's just acknowledging reality.
Right.
So it's kind of a similar view of, it's not relationship based. It's a legalism that exists there.
And I always thought it was interesting as another tangent in Catholicism. We can't get divorced, but we can annul it. It's not a divorce, and your kids aren't illegitimate. It's like it never happened. Well, if the marriage never happened, why aren't the kids illegitimate?
Right.
I know somebody was, they were married for years, had 2 kids, and for whatever reason it didn't work out, and he got it annulled. It's like, okay, well, that's not a divorce.
Right.
Of course, it's a divorce. It's a divorce by some other name, but it's still a divorce.
That's right.
And Jesus does hate divorce, and he does say, only for adultery, and there's another one I forget. Maybe it's just adultery. You could get divorced on or whatever. But there are some pastoral things you can put in there. But certainly God does hate divorce, and we should make it, as minimum as possible. But you have to admit what it is. You can't say we don't allow divorce, but we allow annulments.
Right.
That's not going to work.
Well, and so you say we don't allow divorce, and if you have 2 people that are married, and one of them just says, I'm not going to be here anymore. Oh, okay. I guess that's still as it should be. No, actually, you can destroy that relationship.
And even if we had a system where you were still always legally married, again, you may be legally married, but you're not married in reality. You've broken that, and I think that's what you're trying to get at. We can walk away from God, and you can say, well, God is still your father and you're still his son because you have that. Well, even if that's true, you still don't have the relationship. And the Trinity is all about relationship, not about legalism.
That's it. Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. So, well, good.
It sounds like you had tangent. Wasn't what we were planning on talking about, but
yeah. So, but it sounds like you had some good interactions this week. That's
Yeah, the one was a couple of weeks ago. The other one was just today. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, people bring you things, and you know, I think one of the things when I became Orthodox from Protestant is how much. One of the things I noticed was how much more consistent and how much everything fit together better.
mm-hmm.
You know, in Protestantism, there were always these things that just didn't seem quite to fit together, or you know, the justice thing with God and hell, and the anger and not forgiving, you know, it just never quite seemed to go together. Then you come into Orthodoxy, everything comes together in a nice, coherent whole, if you understand it well.
Mm-hmm.
And we take a lifetime to understand it, but everything comes together in that nice whole.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. Well, so so far we've pretty much sort of we said, okay, let's explore this kind of idea or this topic. So my suggestion for the topic for this go round was to look at, well, first I said let's discuss technology, which is like, that's probably not a great suggestion because technology has so many different forms, and you know, who's going to argue against air conditioning in August in Texas? You know,
Right.
that's technology.
Right.
So granting that, you know, there are all types of technologies that we benefit from all the time. I think maybe specifically having to do with, let's say, the internet, social media, smartphones, sort of like the acceleration of, let's say, technology in our lives. That's our broad topic. So we might say, you know, how have you noticed, let's say, since certainly since the internet, but maybe more specifically since, you know, the acceleration of the effect of technology in our lives, with especially the smartphone. How have you noticed? Have you noticed a change in the behavior of students? Have you noticed a change in the way? I don't know. What's your observation in terms of culture? Just kind of throw that out there. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say the combination. Now, first of all, I want to say technology is neutral. I was talking about this somewhat last week or the week before or something, and we were talking about AI and all this new AI stuff that's coming. He said,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I think that's going to be terrible. It's horrible. It's whatever." And I'm trying to say, look, technology is neutral. It's just that the evil teams seems to use it better, more efficiently, and the good do. That's the problem. So I'm not everything we say here. Obviously, we're making use of technology, right?
That's right.
So we're not saying that technology in and of itself is bad. But what I've noticed is between social media and the smartphone, it's created a oneness of thinking on campus. I can't tell about everywhere. I can't tell about everywhere in the country. But at Penn State, it's this oneness of thought where, as we said many times before, you can't know who God is. You can't know what the truth is. You can't know why we exist. You can't know any of these things. These things weren't, people believed that before, but it wasn't so, they weren't in such lockstep with it. And I think what happened was, and people are afraid to, people are afraid to say certain things. They're afraid to say anything about homosexuality. They're afraid to say anything about transgenderism. Because what's happened is the social media, which was supposed to bring great freedom of speech. I remember when it first came out, everybody now has a platform. Everybody can say whatever it is they want to say. And that's true. And that has happened to a degree. But the other thing that happened is the cancel Gestapo. So the cancel Gestapo gets out there. And if you say the wrong thing and people get wind of it, and they go on social media and they call you the racist, the bigot, the homophobe, the transphobe, the hater, and even the dreaded science denier. And before you know it, you don't got a job anymore, or you're not going to get a job. So the students are scared to death that they won't get a job. People working at the university are scared to death that they'll lose their job. So now nobody says anything. There used to be wide debate out there. Now there's hardly anything. I don't remember the last time I heard student or student group or faculty member or faculty group speak out loudly, boldly, consistently against homosexuality or transgenderism. A little bit about abortion, some student group, but really not much of that either. And they used to all the time. I mean, transgender is relatively new, but homosexuality and abortion, all these things were always debated, and nobody feared, what they were going to say, or nobody feared consequences other than somebody disagreed with them or something. And now nobody will say it. Everybody's afraid that it'll get out on social media, and the corporations are going to come in and they're going to look at social media before they hire somebody. If they say, oh, he's a racist, or he's a homophobe, or he's this, or he's that, well, you're not getting that corporate job. So what the seculars do is they first make the generations coming up godless, basically, right? Mm-hmm. They make them secular. They say you can't know who God is. They make them materialists. And then once they're materialists, they say, well, the corporate cubicle, the big paycheck, that's the height of living. Mm-hmm. Then they come in and they say, but you say the wrong thing, we're going to trash your name on social media, and you're going to lose the corporate paycheck. So now they've got them. They're secular anyhow, because between the social media, the media, the educational system, they come into Penn State now totally secularized, totally corrupted, totally indoctrinated. Whereas before, there was a long time there where you knew who the freshman was because he looked innocent. And maybe 4 years later, he didn't look so innocent. When he came in, he looked innocent. Nobody looks innocent anymore. And everybody's indoctrinated. Everybody thinks the same way. And that's the whole social media. I'll give you a real simple example of this. It's not the best one, but it shows. Since I've been there forever, and a lot of these students, their parents knew me and stuff, for the last couple of years, they want to come and get selfies or whatever. It's a media generation. So, can I get a selfie with you? Say, sure, whatever. It's better than calling me things your parents used to call me, right? Say fine. So this fall, it changed to Be Real. You know what the Be Real is? BE, and then
like like a short video.
It's a short, like
back at you.
Yeah. And so I take the picture of them, and then it takes a picture of me. And it's only a short window of opportunity to do it or whatever. So all of a sudden this fall, everyone wants to do the Be Real. Now, how did it go from everybody wanting the selfie, everybody wanting the Be Real? Back before social media, that never would have happened, because you didn't have that. Everybody didn't know what everybody else was thinking and doing. They weren't seeing all this stuff up there. But that's what happens now. So everybody thinks the same way. Everybody believes the same thing, relatively speaking. I mean, it's a generality, but it's generally true. Because that's what they see, that's what they hear, that's what they've been taught. Everything about the culture feeds this to them. And they're so indoctrinated and so brainwashed that it's almost, and I think I said this before, but it's virtually impossible for us to get them to ask the question, why can't I know who God is? To seriously ask that question, they just won't do it. So if you see a documentary on brainwashing, right, trying to de-brainwash somebody, you can give somebody absolute proof in the beginning that what they've believed isn't true, and they're not going to believe you. And that's the way it is here. We can say to them, here, ask this question. They won't ask it. And secularism is such a flimsy house of cards that question collapses everything. Because for those who may not know this, secularism is basically says, well, you can't know who God is. You can't know what the right religion is. So there's no sense building a society. There's no sense building or having a school system or anything based on a God or a religion, because you can't know what the right one is. So that's the very key point of secularism. You can't know who God is. If that's wrong, then all secularism collapses. Everything the whole belief system that upholds the society, that upholds the educational system, that upholds the media, it all collapses. But it's not just that, it's what upholds their individual life. They are secular, right? So if they ask that question and they realize there is no way to know that you can't know who God is, because there's no way to know that God won't make himself known. So all secularism collapses. Their whole worldview collapses. I think instinctively, they sort of know that, and they don't want to ask the question. That's very different from 10 years ago, where nobody was afraid to ask any questions. You still might have people, may have somebody who want to ask it, but nobody was afraid to ask the questions. Nobody was afraid to say anything. Nobody was afraid of anything. We were actually free. I was telling them today, let's see if I can remember, that the old generation said, live free or die. The new generation says, bow the knee and submit. Because that's whatever the secularists say, that's what they're going to believe. That's how they've been trained. That's their mindset. They don't have this mindset of live free or die anymore. It's just bow the knee and submit. So that's, somebody one time asked me, do you think this is all a conspiracy, grand conspiracy? So I don't know. All I know is I come on to a non-religious campus and everybody thinks alike. So you figure it out. It may not be some top-down conspiracy of 5 people in a room somewhere, but it's a conspiracy in the sense that every institution in America, the whole media educational system, with few exceptions, all saying the same thing. It's all getting into our head, and we're all afflicted with it every day. As Christians, we're afflicted by it. Everybody's afflicted by it, and you can't get away from it. So as Christians, we have to be really sure and really try to continue to purge ourselves of it, because it's always there. Even something as simple as saying gay. I might slip up once in a while, and I like flagellate myself if I do. But even that is secular, right? It has nothing to do with homosexuality. It was all a way to get homosexuality to look good. Right? So, and that's how they work. So it's always there, and it almost can't help but be sucked into it. So as Christians, we always have to realize that. And as Christians, we have to have and one other thing. Well, as Christians, we have to have, I always hear, even from Christians, I hear, well, why fight the culture war? You don't need to fight the culture war. That's politics. That's that stuff. We should just, be Christians and let them do that thing, and we'll do our thing. The problem is that's what we've done. We've let them do their thing, and now kids in elementary school are telling them they might not be the sex they were born with. It might be, if they're born a male, their gender might be female. Well, why is that? It's because we haven't fought the culture war. So now people come into college and they're so screwed up and they're so indoctrinated that they're probably never going to become Christian. So was it worth it? Was it worth not fighting this? That's why you don't fight the culture war to bring a paradise on earth, like the communist one or something like that, or maybe the liberals one or the far left ones. You fight it so that people have half a chance of becoming Christian one day. We haven't fought it. And now they don't, God can do anything, but they're very far gone. And we're still saying, well, why fight the culture war? Well, maybe because your 7-year-old is telling your 7-year-old son that he might be your 7-year-old daughter. Maybe that's why you should fight the culture war. That'd be one reason, at least.
That's right. Have you noticed, so you're saying 10 years ago, you didn't see that total conformity of thought that you do see now?
Yeah, I've been trying to place it. I've been trying to place it going back. It's somewhere around 2014 or so, where you got the tail end of the millennials, and they were the microaggression people. And they were the first ones who were like they came from another planet. They had no idea what Christianity was. They had no idea of anything Christian. They didn't know what the Trinity was. They didn't know, somebody was telling me the other day that they were talking to somebody and they didn't know the story of Adam and Eve, and they couldn't believe it. So I believe it, but it seemed to happen to me. It seemed to happen overnight. One year, it had been going on the way it'd always been going on. People knew Christianity. They may not have been following it, but they knew what it was. They'd say, where is that in the Bible? Because they knew that was some sort of authority. And then all of a sudden, almost overnight, we had spent like 3 years fighting atheists, same atheists all day long. Some of them flunked out because they never went to class. all day long. And then all of a sudden, here's this group. It seemed to like overnight that do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just continued like that. This group, Gen Z, is nicer than they are. They're not the microaggression, at least not at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
They're very nice people, but they're very conformed. They're very submissive. You know, they're bowing the knee to everything. Okay, you're nice. That's nice. It's nice to be nice, but it's your job as you start to become an adult to challenge the ideas that are in the society to see if they work, to see if they're right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your job just to bow the knee and submit. That's a disaster. How are we ever supposed to change the wrong in society? You know, if everyone's just bowing the knee, we need to get back to the live free or die mode, not the submit and bow the knee mode.
Do you think
they're just not that type of people?
Do you think that they view the society then as, like, they've been receiving these messages, right? And certainly, you know, having that reinforced constantly through social media and every interaction that they have, you know, in terms of the technology or whatever. Do you feel like they part of the reason for their submission is that they feel like that society really has buttoned it up, and it's just like holding, like, they can't think of anything wrong with the society?
Yeah, they don't see anything wrong with it at all. Yeah, just how their mind has been formed. You know, that the cultures have never had a more of an opportunity to get inside our head than they do now.
Mm-hmm.
And for the, you know, I don't know when the smartphone came about, maybe 2007 or so.
Yeah,
and then social media was shortly thereafter. I remember when Facebook came out, people were talking about Facebook and everything. I don't remember exactly when that was, but you know, now there's so many ways of getting inside their head that they don't see a problem.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the way things have been. And when you add on to that the secular idea that everything modern is good, and if it conflicts with anything ancient or in the past, if those two things conflict, the modern's always right.
Mm-hmm.
And they have that belief. They're not faking it or anything. They really believe that this is just the way things are, and this is the best way for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough to get through to them. It's tough for them to even ask the questions. I'm not really sure why they won't question exactly. Fear of cancel Gestapo is part of that. I think that's the enforcement arm of the secular elite. But it's how they've been constructed. And that's why we have to fight the culture war. Yeah. We didn't send our kids to public school. Back in our kids started school in the 90s. And one of the reasons we didn't is because early 90s was because we didn't want them being socialized. Well, Karen's a teacher. She didn't think the teaching was very good. But for me, it was I didn't want them to be socialized in a secular way for how many hours a day, 6-8 hours a day, depending on how long they're there, and extracurricular activities, then come home and then, you know, when you're eating dinner and you're going to bed and you hardly have any time to counter that. I didn't want to always be having to counter that. That's a million times worse now.
Yeah.
Now maybe there are public schools out in, you know, Texas or something that aren't so bad. I don't know. Maybe they're out in the Midwest or out in down south or something. Around here, even the small town ones have the whole homosexual thing in them. They might not be as gung ho as the state college ones that, you know, that's you hear at Penn State, but they still have it, and the kids are still being exposed to it, and it's still considered to be not a bad thing. So I'll never ever send my kids to public school anymore, unless you're in a place where they're still relatively Christian, and I don't even know if that place really exists or not. Maybe I'm jaded for living in the Northeast. I don't know. Maybe there's other places. You know, it's not as bad, but you really got, you know, as parents, we're responsible for our kids, and we send them to the public school system and they get corrupted by it. We're responsible for that. Right. So we're responsible for their education, not the school system. So we have to make sure we send them to a place that's consistent with our Christian values. If we can't find one, then we got to buckle down and try to homeschool or something.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Like, I think, like you said, there's just no break from it. I was reading this book about, I guess it's about generally the place of, anyway, one of the points within the book was basically to say, you know, just just how much, let's say, mental disorder is magnified since social media and the smartphone, because and the point was, okay, maybe some kid was going to school and having a hard time, um and that's not even the best scenario, but let's say that that's what some kid is in. He's going to school, but at least he goes home and he gets a break, right?
Right.
And whereas now some kid goes home and now maybe he's getting picked on, through technology. So we could expand that idea and say, maybe before, I went to public school, in terms of the way we were just idiots as far as how we thought about things. And you're sort of bouncing these terrible ideas off each other all day long, but at least you go home and you have a chance to, like, have dinner with your family, and maybe you actually talk to them, or maybe, you have other real human interactions that sort of maybe can counteract that in some way. Um, Whereas now, you know, even when kids are in school, they're on their phones all the time.
Yeah.
That 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 we could talk at length, I think, about public school. We also homeschool our kids. They're a bit younger. They're 12 and 9, so they're still going through the homeschool thing. But um, there's just awful lot that can be said, and I totally agree. I don't know that there's a place that where there's an idyllic public school situation. I think the institution is set up to operate the way that it operates, is my view of it. And now I was a public school teacher for several years, and trying to swim upstream in that environment was challenging. And I no longer am a school teacher, but I get sort of tying this back to the technology issue. Um, if we think of school as a means to condition the population, let's say, you know, uh, which really is kind of its primary function, is uh, producing a predictable population, let's say. When cell phones started becoming popular amongst kids, when I was teaching in, like, let's say 2001, 2002, that thereabouts, it was a big deal. And if a kid's phone went off in the classroom, it was, you would confiscate it, and the parents would have to come in, and it was a big deal. And I thought, okay, well, that's all right. That seems reasonable. There's no reason why they need that. And so then I stopped teaching for a few years, went back to it subsequently. Let me think, probably 4 or 5 years later. And that was after the smartphones were really becoming to where, like, virtually everyone had a smartphone. And not only were you not to, it was like, it was pretty much universally understood, you were not only not to take them away, but they were just sort of like this natural part of your classroom. So kids were on those things all day long, which, if I was a kid in high school, let's say, um, I didn't enjoy high school very much. I was constantly looking for a distraction. And so I would have been on it too, if I had that opportunity. But the idea that, like, this school is there for the purpose of education, and yet we are allowing across the board constant distraction in the form of technology, that tells you an awful lot about sort of the underlying philosophy there, you know. And I definitely think that, maybe this is for another time, but I definitely think that there's an idea within public education too, that, like, they believe in technology, right? Like, so computer labs, and then every classroom having a whole set of computers, and just the different, ultimately unnecessary pieces of technology that they're spending millions of dollars on. There's something about that, and part of that is big business, let's say, but there's something about the philosophy of a belief in, like you said earlier, like, newer is better, technological progress is better, that sort of just gets it's unstated, but it's constantly reinforced in the schools for sure. So yeah, if they really cared about public schools being a place for serious serious learning, there's no way you'd have 30 kids all with their own device goofing around all day.
No, you wouldn't even let them bring it into school.
No, that's right.
They were really serious about it. Like, we didn't have that problem when we were educating our kids. Our kids were young. The smartphone really wasn't around that I can remember. Although I remember when Facebook came on, we only had one computer. It's in the living room. Nobody. Well, when Micah was, in high school later on, I think he got a laptop. He bought one before he went to college, so he had that one a little bit. For most of the time, there was only one computer. It was in the living room, and so the kids wanted Facebook. So Karen said, "Okay, we can have Facebook, but I get your login, I get your password. I can get on there anytime I want and look at it." Right? So that was okay because we could check it. I don't think, if I was raising kids today, that I'd let them have a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
And they could whine and cry, but I was pretty good at saying, "Well, that's life. I'm the parent,
Uh-huh.
I don't really care. I'm supposed to be your protector, and you can get that smartphone without me knowing it. You can get on pornography. You can get on all sorts of terrible places, and I have no control over it."
Mm-hmm.
So when you're an adult, you want to do that, that's up to you. But I'm responsible for you when you're a kid, and I don't think I would let them do that. And they'd whine and cry, I'm sure, but guess I'm not empathetic.
Yeah,
that's what's best for you. So, and it's tough to raise kids these days because of all the technology and stuff. But you just have to clamp down on it and make sure that you know what they're doing, because it's too many ways of getting into trouble, and you can't just give in because everybody else is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're gonna regret that.
Right. And the challenge there, of course, is like, but how will I have friends? This is how all my friends communicate and things of that nature, right?
Well, give them a flip phone.
Yeah.
Give them a flip phone.
That's what's so kind of greasy about it, It's like it's hard to extract yourself from that,
Yeah, it is. It is, but ultimately, like I said, I don't have much empathy, and I'd say, look, if you want to call your friends, we'll give you a flip phone.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that can get on the internet. When you're 18 and out of the house, then you can do whatever it is you want. But this isn't going to happen because it's too dangerous. Now, maybe I would change that. I don't know. I'm not raising kids. Maybe when they got 17, 18, if I really thought they were responsible, maybe, I don't know. But it's just too much, when kids are young, it's just too much of a temptation.
Yeah.
And if you can't have friends because you don't have a smartphone, well,
yeah,
life. Not much of a friend there.
Yeah, one of the I don't know, there's just so many things about this sort of topic. There's an author that I really liked related to the question of public schooling, and he was commenting years ago about this advertisement, probably when we were like in the flip phone days, and the advertisement was saying like, oh man, I have like expressing envy over someone else's phone. He's like, can you imagine being so shallow that like you care what kind of phone you have versus someone else's? And it's like, I don't think you could find a young person that wouldn't care, that it's such a central and important thing, like the advertisement is so slick. It's just, I don't think it would be difficult to find a young person who just wouldn't who would just wonder why wouldn't you want the greatest? It is important.
Yeah, that's kind of part of fallen human nature. I mean, I'm sure the Amish deal with who has the plainest clothes, who has the blackest buggy. It's just part of human nature.
Yeah.
So anyhow, yeah, it's a problem, and the secular culture is a problem, and we as Christians need to get involved in it. We need to assert ourselves. We need to do what we can do and try to be a voice in the wilderness and a light in the darkness, because it's really screwing people up, and it's our fault. We all have to take responsibility for it. We haven't done enough.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that was actually really beneficial to me when I was a freshman at Penn State in 1996, and I came to Penn State, did not have a television, and did not have my own computer, which would be completely especially the computer would be completely unheard of now. But for me, that was actually really a great thing, because I had to get to know other people, but then that also was, your ministry was like that was the entertainment, and I didn't have this kind of like constant voice in my ear, or didn't have this constant input, so that I could actually think about things. How novel.
Yeah, when you're always taking in new information, you don't have time to think about anything. And you're right, that was a form of entertainment. People would always tell me, "Oh, I come out here to be entertained." And I say, "Okay, why do you come out here? Maybe you'll learn something when you're out here." Or they made up top 10 lists. David Letterman used to have his top 10 lists, and they made up top 10 lists. Why the Willard fornicators fornicate, or why the Willard drunkers get drunk. Every Friday they'd come out, because I told them I'd do it on Friday. Every Friday they'd come out, and those steps would be, bottom steps would be filled with people, and they'd want to hear those top 10 lists, because they didn't have any other form of entertainment. Or the Friday speech, they loved that because it was entertaining. They didn't have didn't have much other forms of entertainment. But now everybody's got, again, the phone is entertainment, so you don't have that as much. I remember watching one of the pictures you put up, before you started into the broadcast, and people were just sitting out on the steps. I'm thinking, boy, I didn't appreciate that when it was happening. All those people just sitting there all day long, and you could just talk to them all day long. And now, it's rare to have anybody sitting out there. So yeah, I didn't appreciate that when I had it, but I would appreciate it now if it started up again.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But before we, I don't know how much time we have left.
We can continue. Yeah.
But before we, I just wanted to say one thing. A lot of people have contacted me and asked me if they could be on the podcast.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say before I don't know how much time we have left, but just to make sure I get this in before we go, that we haven't, we're just starting this. We're just learning how to do it. Technology, I'm a tech idiot. Matt does all the tech stuff, but we're still all trying to get this together and how we're doing it and everything. So we're not sure what we're going to do about having people on. But if we do decide to have people on, we can, certainly some of the people that have asked, we could have on. In the meantime, there's the email that's up there, I guess. And you can email us if you have a question or a comment, or in the comment section on the YouTube thing, you can put something in there, or you can Facebook myself, or I guess you have a Facebook account. I don't know if you do or you don't. And you can Facebook one of us, and we can answer your questions. If it's an interesting comment, we can talk about your comment. So in the meantime, before we decide whether we want to allow people on or not, if you want to kind of interact in that way, that would be fine. We'd be more than willing to entertain your questions, or maybe talk about your comments.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll have to see, there are settings in which, we can receive live questions, maybe even, maybe we might even have somebody that is on to speak with you or debate or something, discuss a particular idea with you.
I just had an atheist, the guy that I knew from Penn State said, "Well, do you ever want an atheist on?" And that's a possibility someday. We'll just have to see how it goes and how we do that. But that's certainly a possibility.
Absolutely. But yeah, I second the sentiment that we are just sort of figuring it out, all sides of it, how it should work, what the content should be, just how it'll go. I posted the second episode and it was all out of sync and had to repost it. So that tells you the level of expertise we're talking about here.
Right. Well, these glitches will happen, but we got it fixed up. So no harm, no foul. So
All right. Well, anything else we want to chat about?
Um, and I think that's probably okay for today. Everybody's about an hour.
Yeah, I think we're right about there.
So I think that's pretty good.
Okay.
We can take up again next week.
That sounds good. Yeah, and we certainly didn't exhaust what we were talking about. But as we talk, there's sort of other things that other directions we can go. And as we talked about in the very first episode, there's no real lack of things to talk about because it's ultimately has bearing on whether someone comes to seek and know God, and whether that is possible or how that process is influenced. And so that's ultimately what we're always kind of going to tie things back to. So
yeah, and a lot of times on campus, people don't understand when I spend time like today saying that people are just submitting and bowing the knee to whatever the secularists say. If they say you can't know who God is, they say okay, and they bow the knee. Or transgender is good, they bow the knee. Well, that's not Christianity. But as long as they're in that mode, they're not open to anything. So you got to kind of, I used to tell Father John, we have to start before the beginning these days. Because you got, if people are just going to just blindly submit to the secular elite, then you don't stand a chance. You have to get in there and try to interrupt that a little bit and say, look, this isn't good. And every one of the things I was going to say is every culture does this. Every culture tries to bring the next generation along and have them conform to where the culture is. And that's all right. That's the way it should be to a degree. But every culture also, as they come into adulthood, or every generation as they come into adulthood, has to look at these things and say, are these things right? Can these things stand? And that's your responsibility as the next generation. I may have mentioned this before, but I'll mention again if I did. It's your responsibility to do that. And once we start abdicating that responsibility, we're going downhill, and who knows where we're going to end up. And we've abdicated that responsibility.
Yeah. Well, and you and I have, your kids are grown, my kids are younger, but in raising Christian kids, we teach them, as they grow, the tenets of the Christian faith and how to live that. But it's still important for them at some point to say, to say, is this right? Is this true? Confirming those things, and do I want to continue to move forward? So we would expect the same sort of questioning from, let's say, a young person growing up in the faith that we would, anyone in the secular society. We would want them to question what they see and confirm that it's the truth, that kind of thing.
Yeah, all kids have to do that. All kids who grow up in a Christian home at some point in time have to say, is this real? And what you hope is that you've given enough understanding, given enough of the mindset, and given enough understanding that when they do maybe stray for a little while, if they do, or they do question it, which most will, that they'll realize it's true. So a young Christian kid straying isn't the end of the world, depending on what they do, but because hopefully they're going to learn from that. Oh, what my parents taught me was true. But then they found that out maybe by straying a little bit. Some kids have to do that. I don't want to know what my kids did in college, right? Then who knows? But hopefully they didn't stray too far. But sometimes you have to do that to be able to say, oh, I guess this was true. This isn't taking me. I'm going down this road. They told me this wasn't a good road. I can see that now. I need to get back to the right road. And that's the thing, I think, with secularism. They can't allow that. They can't allow that questioning because it's so fragile. It's that house of cards that can be knocked over just by the breeze of somebody walking past it. It's so fragile, it's just barely standing. But they have to do things so that people don't question it. That's always should be, your antennas should go up. They don't want people questioning. Why not?
Yeah.
Right. So they should, every at some point in time, the school districts or the colleges or whatever should say, okay, this is what secularism is. We say we can't know who God is. So we can't, make a culture based on that or an educational system based on that. Now try to knock that down if you can. They won't do that. They can't do that because that one question knocks it down. But every Christian school should do that too. Every Christian home should do, well, this is what we believe. We believe, in Jesus Christ. We believe in the Holy Trinity. We believe in this. We believe that this is the true religion and the true God. Now, knock that down if you can. And because, that's, if you won't do that, then you're afraid of something. If you're afraid of questions, then you don't really believe that your belief system can stand.
Right.
So we have to, I would encourage, I always encourage, my kids, I think, they can tell if they watch this, they can tell me I'm full of it, but, they can say, well, I always thought it was good if they questioned, Now I was fortunate, because I was out there every day. I was defending the faith. I could do it fairly well. And a lot of parents aren't doing that. But if you don't know the answer to your kids' questions, just don't blow them off. You can say, well, I'll find the answer for you. Then go find it. I mean, that's how I learned. You get out there and people ask you questions. You try to give them an answer, or you say, look, maybe I left afterwards and said that wasn't a good answer. Or maybe as a parent, you say, well, I don't really know the answer to that. And you go and find the answer for them. And that helps you as a parent, helps them as a kid. But you never just say, because that's the way it is, because we say so. You say, well, for now, it's because we say so, but I'll find you a better answer or something. Just don't leave it that way. You want them to ask those questions and get good answers when they're at home, before they go off to college or before they go off to work or before they go off to whatever they do. And they run into all this stuff. They have to know this stuff beforehand. It's too late once they get there. They don't know it. They don't know it before they get there. It's going to be tough for them to hang on.
That's right. Yeah. And I think I can remember times when you encountered students and they would say, so you're just saying that we shouldn't question anything about this religion. And you would say, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. You should question everything about it. You should seek to figure out what is true. And that was really refreshing. And, as soon as you say, that, because you will hear this in certain parts of Christianity, like, if you have doubts or you're questioning this thing or that it shows a lack of faith on your part, and that's bad news.
Yeah, because basically the way people are going to hear that is you don't have an answer. Well, so if you don't have an answer, maybe I'll go to the secularist, or maybe I'll go to a different religion that does have the answers. Yeah. So and none of us has all the answers. Even in Sunday school, I said, look, if you ask something we don't know it, we can find it out for you, and we can get back to you on it. And that happened a couple of weeks ago. Somebody asked me something. I didn't know what the answer is, but we got it and we got back to them. There's always an answer. If what you believe is true, there's always an answer. You just got to go find it. And kids know when you're faking it. And they're not going to be satisfied with because we said so, or God said it, I believe it, that settles it, sort of thing. That's just not, not going to work.
That's right.
They're not going to buy that. And they're going to go stray eventually. And they're not going to have anything to bring them back.
Well, there you go.
There you go. That's it. Completed another, whatever we call this, Willard Preacher podcast.
That's it. Well, thanks for being on with me, Gary. I appreciate you taking the time, and this has been fun as always. So I will sign off for this week, and I guess I'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll do it again next week. Should be fun.
All right. Sounds good.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Yep, you too.